The late afternoon sun, heavy and golden as honey, poured through the kitchen window, catching on the lazy dance of dust motes above the sink. I wiped my hands on my apron, the familiar, rough texture of the checkered cotton a small comfort against the growing unease in my stomach. The smell of simmering marinara sauce, rich with garlic and basil, usually filled me with a sense of purpose, but today it felt like a relic from a quieter, simpler time. From upstairs, the thumping bass of a song I didn't recognize vibrated through the floorboards, a steady, invasive pulse that made the glasses in the cupboard tremble with a faint, nervous ringing. My daughter, Lila, was 17. I knew this age was a threshold, a shaky bridge between the child who once built pillow forts in the living room and the stranger who now applied eyeliner with a surgeon's precision. But the chasm between us these past few months had grown so wide and so dark, I feared I might never find my way across again. The doorbell chimed, a sound usually so benign, but now it felt like a starting pistol. I heard the frantic patter of Lila's feet on the stairs, a whirlwind of perfume and anxiety. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, a vision in a short black dress I'd never seen before. Her hair, usually tied in a messy bun, fell in sleek, caramel-colored waves around her shoulders. "Mom, remember the plan, okay?" she said, her voice a rushed whisper, though the pounding music from above surely drowned it out for anyone else. "You're not feeling well. Migraine. You'll be in your room. All night." I looked at her, at the pleading in her wide, hazel eyes, so like her father's. "Lila, are you sure about this? So many people, your father and I won't be here if..." "We've been over this," she interrupted, a sharp edge to her words. "It's just a few friends. It's no big deal. But you'll, cramp my style." She offered a tight, brittle smile. "Please, Mom. It's important." Before I could answer, the doorbell rang again, more insistently this time. She spun away, her dress flaring, and I was left alone in the kitchen with the angry sauce and the trembling glasses. I heard the front door open, a burst of youthful laughter, the clatter of shoes on the hardwood. The scent of her perfume was quickly overpowered by the smell of night air, cheap body spray, and the sweet, cloying aroma of canned beer. My husband, Mark, came up behind me, his large, warm hand settling on my shoulder. "Let it go, Maria," he murmured, his voice a low rumble against my ear. "It's one night. She needs this. We'll go see that movie, give her some space." "Space?" I whispered, turning to face him. "Mark, this isn't space. This is a surrender. She's banning us from our own living room." He sighed, the lines around his eyes deepening. He looked tired. We both were. "She's finding her way. We were young once, too. Remember that party at Jake's house? When his parents were away?" "That was different," I said, "but was it?" I couldn't even remember. The memory was fuzzy, overshadowed by the sharp, clear reality of my own daughter exiling me to my bedroom like a shameful secret. An hour later, the house was transformed. The gentle thumping had become a seismic roar, the very walls seeming to breathe with the rhythm. Laughter, shouts, and the shattering of what sounded like a glass echoed from the living room. The air in the hallway was thick and warm, smelling of sweat, spilled soda, and something sharper, something alcoholic. Mark and I stood by the front door, coats on, feeling like trespassers. Lila spotted us. She weaved through a cluster of teenagers, her face flushed. "You're still here," she said, her voice raised over the din. "We're leaving now," Mark said, his voice too loud, too hearty. "You have your phone? We'll be back by midnight." Yeah, Lila said, her eyes already scanning the crowd behind us. Then her gaze landed on me, and her expression hardened. "Mom, your room. Remember? You're sick." The words were a physical blow. They stole the air from my lungs. I looked at my daughter, at this beautiful, fierce stranger, and I felt a piece of my heart crack and fall away into the darkness. "Yes," I managed to say, my voice thin and reedy. "I remember. I didn't go to my room. Not right away. Instead, I climbed the stairs to the second floor, each step a heavy, reluctant effort. The music was louder up here, a relentless beat that made my teeth ache. I passed the bathroom, where a line of girls giggled, their reflections in the mirror looking like a flock of exotic, chattering birds. I ignored them and walked to the end of the hall, to the one place in this chaotic house that still felt like mine. My office was a small, cluttered sanctuary. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves bowed under the weight of countless novels, their spines a faded tapestry of colors. My writing desk, an old, scarred oak thing, sat under the window, covered in messy piles of manuscript pages, a half-empty mug of cold tea, and a framed photograph of Lila at age 7, missing her 2 front teeth, beaming from the top of a swing set. The air in here still smelled of paper, ink, and the faint, comforting scent of the lavender sachet I kept in a drawer. I closed the door, and the noise from downstairs became a muted, persistent throb, like a headache forming behind your eyes. I sank into my worn leather chair, the coolness of the leather a relief against my skin. I could feel the vibration of the music through the floor, a constant, irritating reminder of the party, of my banishment. I tried to read, but the words swam on the page. I tried to write, but my thoughts were a tangled knot of hurt and anxiety. All I could do was sit and listen to the evidence of my own irrelevance echoing through my home. The laughter felt like a mockery. Every shout was a confirmation of my exile. Time stretched and warped. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew, a sudden, sharp sound jolted me awake. It wasn't part of the music. It was a crash, followed by a wave of louder, more raucous laughter. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stood up, my body stiff, and crept to the door. I opened it a crack. The hallway was empty now, but the noise from below was a solid wall of sound. I could smell cigarette smoke. Lila had promised, no smoking. A cold dread began to pool in my stomach. This was more than a few friends. This was a mob. And my daughter was somewhere in the middle of it, a queen ruling a kingdom she could not possibly control. I knew I should stay put. I knew that was the agreement, the price for this fragile peace. But the mother in me, the part that remembered skin knees and nightmares, that remembered the weight of a sleeping child in my arms, that part would not be silenced. I had to see. I had to know she was okay. I didn't go downstairs. That would be a direct confrontation, a breaking of the treaty. Instead, I turned and walked softly to the very end of the hall, to the small, narrow door that was almost invisible, set into the wallpapered wall. The linen closet. But it was more than that. I opened the door. The smell of clean laundry and cedar chips wafted out. I reached inside, my fingers finding the familiar, smooth wooden panel at the back. I pressed a hidden catch, a secret my grandfather had built into this house decades ago, a whimsical addition for a child he never lived to meet. The panel slid sideways with a soft, whispery sound, revealing a steep, dark staircase. The secret staircase. It led down to a small, hidden alcove behind the built-in shelves in the living room. From there, through a cleverly designed latticework of wood, you could see and hear almost everything in the main room without being seen. It was a place for childhood games of hide-and-seek, a place I sometimes used to steal a moment of quiet solitude when the world felt too loud. Tonight, it would be my lookout post. I climbed down, the wooden steps creaking softly under my weight. The air in the staircase was cool and still, thick with dust. At the bottom, I knelt on the rough, unfinished floorboards and peered through the intricate lattice. The living room was a jarring spectacle. The furniture had been pushed back against the walls, creating a chaotic dance floor in the center. Bodies writhed and jerked to the pounding music, their faces slick with sweat in the dim, pulsating colored lights from a lamp someone had brought. The air was a haze of smoke and steam. On the coffee table, my grandmother's hand-embroidered tablecloth was stained with red punch and littered with plastic cups, some upright, some spilled, their contents soaking into the precious fabric. And there was Lila. She was at the center of it all, a bottle in her hand, her head thrown back in laughter. But even from my hidden vantage point, I could see the tension in her shoulders, the too wide set of her eyes. She was performing. This wasn't the easy joy of a teenager having fun, this was the desperate pantomime of someone trying to prove she belonged. My eyes scanned the room, my heart a frantic bird beating against the cage of my ribs. I saw a boy I didn't recognize, his movements clumsy and aggressive, stumbling into the bookshelf and making the framed photos upon it rattle. I saw a girl crying silently in a corner, another girl trying to console her. And then I saw him. He was older. Not by a lot, maybe 20 or 21, but at that moment, the gap seemed a chasm. He stood near the fireplace, leaning against the mantel with a casual arrogance that made my skin prickle. He wasn't dancing. He was watching. His eyes, dark and intent, were fixed on Lila. He held a red plastic cup, but he rarely drank from it. He just watched her, a small, possessive smile playing on his lips. I didn't like him. It was an immediate, visceral reaction. It was in the way he held himself, in the cold calculation of his gaze. This was not one of Lila's school friends. This was someone else. Someone who did not belong in this picture. As I watched, he pushed himself off the mantel and moved through the crowd toward Lila. He said something in her ear. She flinched, almost imperceptibly, and her laughter died. She shook her head. He leaned in closer, his hand coming to rest on her lower back, a gesture that was meant to look intimate but seemed to me like a claim of ownership. Lila's posture went rigid. My fingers curled into fists, my nails biting into my palms. I wanted to burst through the latticework, to grab my daughter and pull her away from him. But I was trapped by my own promise, by my banishment. I could only watch, a ghost in my own home, as this predator circled my child. The song changed, the beat becoming slower, heavier. The crowd on the dance floor thickened. For a moment, I lost sight of Lila and the older boy. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through me. I shifted, trying to get a better angle, pressing my face against the wooden lattice. And then I saw them again. They were moving, not toward the door, but toward the hallway that led to the kitchen. His arm was around her shoulders, guiding her, steering her. She was walking, but her steps were unsteady, her body language a confused mix of resistance and acquiescence. They disappeared from my view. I had to move. I had to get to the kitchen. I scrambled back up the secret stairs, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I didn't care about the noise now. I burst out of the linen closet and into the hallway, ignoring the startled looks from a couple necking by the bathroom door. I half ran, half stumbled down the main staircase, pushing my way through the dense, sweaty crowd in the living room. "Hey, watch it," a voice slurred behind me. I didn't care. My entire world had narrowed to the doorway of my kitchen. I reached it and stopped, my hand gripping the doorframe. The scene inside was both a relief and a fresh horror. They weren't alone. Two of Lila's friends, girls I recognized from the soccer team, were there, leaning against the counter. The older boy was there too, standing too close to Lila by the refrigerator. The smell of spilled beer and something sour, like vomit, mixed with the lingering scent of my marinara sauce, creating a nauseating cocktail. Lila saw me first. Her eyes widened in shock and then flashed with pure, undiluted fury. "Mom," she spat the word like a curse. "What are you doing down here? I told you to stay in your room." The older boy turned slowly, his cold eyes appraising me. He didn't look startled or guilty. He looked amused. I came down for a glass of water," I stammered, the lie weak and transparent. "You're embarrassing me." Lila shrieked, her voice cracking. The music from the living room seemed to swell, as if amplifying her anger. "Get out. Just get out." The two other girls looked at the floor, uncomfortable. The boy's smirk deepened. And in that moment, something in me broke. The hurt, the fear, the weeks of walking on eggshells, it all coalesced into a cold, hard clarity. I looked past my daughter's rage, past the smirking boy, and my eyes fell on the kitchen table. It was littered with bottles, cups, and the detritus of the party. And there, lying carelessly beside a half-eaten bag of chips, was Lila's small, rose-gold clutch purse. The one she'd been so excited to buy for this very party. It was unzipped, gaping open. And nestled inside, its screen dark, was her phone. She had forgotten her phone. Continua a história. A silence seemed to descend upon the kitchen, a bubble of stillness in the roaring chaos of the house. It was just a phone. A mundane, everyday object. But in that context, lying vulnerable and forgotten in her open purse, it was a key. It was a door she had carelessly left unlocked. Lila followed my gaze. Her furious expression flickered, replaced by a flicker of confusion, and then a dawning, sickening realization. "My phone," she whispered. The older boy's smirk vanished. His casual arrogance tightened into something alert, defensive. "Lila, let's go," he said, his voice low, trying to regain control. He reached for her arm. I moved without thinking. I stepped forward, my body positioning itself between him and my daughter. I didn't touch him. I just looked at him, and I put every ounce of maternal authority, every bit of fear and fury I felt, into that look. "I think you should leave," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, colder than I intended. He held my gaze for a long, challenging moment. The air crackled. I could smell the stale beer on his breath, see the faint stubble on his chin. He was just a boy, really, but a dangerous one. "Mom, stop it!" Lila cried, her voice shrill with panic now, not just anger. "Lucas, don't listen to her." Lucas. So he had a name. He finally looked away from me, back to Lila. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head, a silent communication I couldn't decipher. Then he turned and walked out of the kitchen, melting back into the crowd without another word. The two other girls mumbled excuses and scurried out after him, leaving Lila and me alone in the tense, smelly brightness of the kitchen. The hum of the refrigerator seemed deafening. Lila stood frozen, her chest heaving. She was a statue of betrayed fury. "How could you?" she finally hissed. "You humiliated me. In front of my friends. In front of him." I didn't answer her. My eyes were still fixed on the phone. That simple, forgotten object had shifted the balance of power in the room. It was a tangible piece of her secret world, now lying exposed in mine. "He's 22, Mom," she continued, her voice trembling. "He has a car. He's in a band. Everyone thinks he's amazing. And you treated him like a criminal." "He's too old for you, Lila," I said, my voice still quiet, but firm. "And the way he was looking at you, the way he touched you, it wasn't right. You don't know anything about him. Or about me," she shouted, tears starting to well in her eyes. "You just want to control me. You want me to be your perfect little girl forever, sitting in this stupid, boring house with its stupid, boring smells." She gestured wildly at the pot of now burnt marinara sauce. Her words were meant to wound, and they did. They found their mark with the precision of a scalpel. But the image of that phone in her open purse was a shield, deflecting the worst of the blow. "This isn't about control, Lila," I said, taking a step toward the table. "This is about safety. My God, look at this place. Look at what's happening. You promised me a few friends. This is a riot. It's a party. Something you wouldn't understand because you and Dad are so old and..." She trailed off as she saw my hand hover over her purse. "You forgot your phone," I said softly. The change in her was instantaneous and terrifying. The anger evaporated, replaced by a raw, primal fear. Her face went pale. "Give that to me," she said, her voice a low, desperate whisper. She lunged for the table. I was closer. My fingers closed around the cool, hard casing of the phone. I picked it up. It felt heavy in my hand, charged with secrets. "Give it to me, Mom. You have no right." She was in front of me now, her hands clawing at my arm, her breath hot on my face. "I have every right," I said, holding the phone up, out of her reach. "I am your mother. This is my house. And you are in over your head." I looked at her, really looked at her. The smudged mascara, the trembling lip, the sheer, unadulterated terror in her eyes. This was more than just fear of getting in trouble for the party. This was something else. This was about the phone. "What are you hiding, Lila?" I asked, the question hanging in the foul air between us. Her resolve broke. The fight went out of her, and she crumpled, sobbing, her hands covering her face. "Please," she begged, her voice muffled. "Please, just give it back. Don't look. Please." It was the "don't look" that sealed it. That was the confession. I looked down at the dark screen of the phone. My thumb hovered over the home button. I knew her passcode. It was the same one she'd had since she was 13, the date of our old dog's birthday. She'd never bothered to change it, a small oversight in her frantic rush toward adulthood, a tiny thread still connecting her to the child she used to be. I pressed the button. The screen glowed to life. I swiped and began to type in the code. "No!" Lila screamed, but it was a hopeless sound, a plea lost in the wind. The phone unlocked. The home screen was a picture of her and two friends, their faces smiling, smushed together. It looked like a relic from 1,000 years ago. My heart was a drumbeat in my throat. I opened her messages. My eyes scanned the list of names. And there it was. Lucas. At the top. Dozens of messages. I opened the thread. And I began to read. The world around me, the pounding music, the shouting, the smell of ruin, it all faded into a distant, muffled roar. There was only the phone, the glowing screen, and the words. His words. They were not the words of a 22-year-old interested in a 17-year-old girl. They were demands. They were manipulations. They were financial. The conversation started flirty, awkward compliments from Lila, cocky, dismissive responses from him. Then they shifted. He started asking for small loans. $50 for gas. $100 for a speeding ticket. Lila, eager to please, eager to prove she was mature enough for him, sent it via a payment app. The amounts grew. $200. $300. He'd promised to pay her back, then make her feel guilty for asking, calling her selfish, accusing her of not trusting him. Then, last week, the tone turned dark. The loans were no longer requests. They were expectations. He told her he needed $500 by tonight. Or else. My blood ran cold. I scrolled, my fingers trembling. Asterisk Lucas, you're coming to the party. You're bringing the money. Don't be late, asterisk. Asterisk Lila, I don't have $500. That's all my savings from babysitting, asterisk. Asterisk Lucas, then get more. Ask your mommy. Steal it from her purse. I don't care. I need it, asterisk. Asterisk Lila, I can't do that. Lucas, you're scaring me, asterisk. Asterisk Lucas, you should be scared. You don't want me to tell everyone what you did at Sarah's party, do you? You don't want that video getting out, do you, asterisk. The messages stopped there. The last one was from him, sent just 4 hours ago. Asterisk Lucas, 500. Tonight. Or your pristine reputation is over. I'll send it to everyone. Your parents. Your teachers. The whole school, asterisk. I lowered the phone. I looked at my daughter. She was slumped against the kitchen counter, her body racked with silent sobs, her face a mask of shame and terror. The noise of the party was a cruel, jeering soundtrack to her devastation. It all made sense now. The party. The desperate need for us to be absent. It wasn't about rebellion. It wasn't about style. It was a delivery. A payment under duress. She had invited a wolf into our home because he was holding a knife to her reputation, to her future. The hurt I had felt moments before, the sting of her rejection, evaporated, replaced by a freezing, focused rage. It was a clean, sharp emotion, cutting through the confusion and the pain. This was no longer a teenage drama. This was a fight. Lila, I said, my voice calm, but with a steel core she had never heard before. She looked up, her eyes red and swimming with tears. She expected my anger. She expected my disappointment. She was braced for it. But she wasn't braced for what came next. I walked over to her. I didn't hug her. Not yet. I put my hands on her shoulders, forcing her to look at me. Listen to me, I said, each word deliberate and clear. This stops. Right now. He has a video, Mom, she whispered, her voice broken. From Sarah's party? I was drunk. I didn't know, It doesn't matter, I said, and I meant it. He is a predator. And he picked the wrong girl to prey on. I looked toward the living room, where the music still pounded. Is he still here? She nodded, a fresh wave of tears spilling over. I think so. I was supposed to give him the money. Okay, I said, my mind racing, plans forming and solidifying with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Okay. Here is what we are going to do. Continue a história. The first thing I did was walk to the kitchen door and close it, turning the old, brass lock with a definitive, solid click. The roar of the party became muffled again, contained. We were in a bunker now. Next, I went to the landline phone, the old, corded one mounted on the wall that Lila always mocked as ancient. I picked up the receiver. My hand was steady. Lila watched me, her sobs quieting to hiccuping breaths. What are you doing? She asked, her voice small and lost. I'm calling your father, I said, dialing his cell number. He answered on the second ring, the sounds of a movie trailer booming in the background. Maria? Everything okay? His voice was laced with concern. Mark, I need you to come home. Right now. I didn't give him details. I didn't have to. The tone of my voice, the one I used only in true emergencies, conveyed everything. Don't ask questions. Just come. And when you get here, I need you to go to the circuit breaker in the garage and kill the power to the whole house. There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end. Kill the power? Maria, what in God's name is? Now, Mark, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. Please. I hung up before he could respond. I turned to Lila. Go upstairs to the bathroom. Lock the door. Do not come out until I or your father come to get you. Do you understand? The authority in my voice seemed to galvanize her. The terrified child receded, and a glimmer of the strong-willed girl I knew surfaced. She nodded, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. What are you going to do? I'm going to clean up this mess, I said. Now go. She scurried out of the kitchen, and I heard her footsteps racing up the stairs. I was alone again. I looked at the phone in my hand, Lucas's threats glowing on the screen. I took a deep, shuddering breath. The smell of burnt sauce and beer was still there, but now it was just background noise. My senses were heightened, tuned to a single frequency, survival. I waited. The seconds stretched into an eternity. The bass from the living room seemed to mock my stillness. I could feel the vibrations through the soles of my shoes. Then, abruptly, it happened. The music died. The colored lights vanished. The refrigerator's hum cut off. The house was plunged into a profound, shocking, and absolute darkness. The sudden silence was louder than the music had ever been. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, a wave of confused shouts, groans, and complaints erupted from the living room. Hey! What the hell? The power's out. I didn't move. I stood in the pitch-black kitchen, waiting for my eyes to adjust. A sliver of moonlight filtered through the window over the sink, painting a pale, silver stripe across the floor. I could make out the shapes of the table, the chairs. This was my territory. I knew every inch of it in the dark. I heard the front door open and close. Mark was home. Good. I unlocked the kitchen door and stepped out into the hallway. The scene was chaotic. Dozens of phone flashlights flicked on, creating a jerky, strobe-like effect. Kids were stumbling, bumping into each other, their faces confused and annoyed in the stark, sudden illumination. Party's over, a voice yelled. It was Mark. His voice, deep and commanding, cut through the babble. Everybody out. Now. There was a grumble, but the exodus began. The mass of teenagers started shuffling toward the front door, a disorganized herd. I stood back, near the entrance to the living room, my eyes scanning the crowd, looking for one face. And I found him. Lucas. He wasn't moving with the crowd. He was standing near the built-in shelves, his own phone held up, its light scanning the room, looking for something. Or someone. Lila. This was the moment. I walked toward him. I moved calmly, purposefully, through the chaos. He saw me approaching and his face hardened. The cold, amused mask was back, but I could see the tension around his eyes. He was unsettled. Where is she? He demanded, his voice a low growl. She's gone, I said, stopping a few feet from him. The last of the partygoers were pushing past us, eager to escape the dark, deflated scene. "She has something that belongs to me," he said, taking a step closer. He was taller than me, and he tried to use his height to intimidate me. I didn't flinch. I held up Lila's phone. "You mean this?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "You mean the messages on here? The threats? The blackmail?" His eyes flickered to the phone, then back to my face. The mask slipped completely, revealing the ugly anger beneath. "I don't know what you're talking about. She owes me money." "No," I said, shaking my head slowly. "She doesn't owe you anything. But you have a decision to make." He let out a short, harsh laugh. "Oh yeah? And what's that?" I took another step forward, so close I could see the pores on his skin in the harsh phone light. "You are going to delete that video. Every copy. Right now. And then you are going to walk out of this house and never, ever contact my daughter again." "Or what?" he sneered. "You'll call the cops? Go ahead. I'll show them the video. I'll tell them she was begging for it. See who they believe." The vileness of his words was like a physical blow, but I stood my ground. My rage was a cold, solid iceberg in my chest. "I'm not going to call the police," I said. "I'm going to call your mother." The effect was instantaneous and profound. All the color drained from his face. His arrogant posture deflated. His eyes widened with a fear that was far more genuine than any fear Lila had shown. You don't know my mother." "Don't I?" I said, lifting Lila's phone again. "It's all right here. Your full name. Lucas Miller. And a simple search. Well, it turns out your mother, Brenda Miller, is a rather well-respected family court judge. I have her office number right here. I imagine she would be very, very interested to know how her 22-year-old son spends his time. Blackmailing teenage girls for money. I wonder what the press would make of that. I wonder what her colleagues would say." I was bluffing. I had done no such search. But the seed of terror I had planted took root and blossomed in his eyes. He was a bully, and like all bullies, he was a coward when faced with a greater threat. The threat of exposure to the one person whose opinion he might actually fear, the one person who could bring real consequences down upon him. "You wouldn't," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Try me," I said, my voice flat and absolute. "Delete the video. Now." His hands were trembling. He fumbled with his own phone, his fingers clumsy. He tapped the screen, his movements frantic. It's done," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. "Show me," I commanded. He held out his phone. On the screen was his video gallery. He selected a file and showed me the thumbnail. It was dark, grainy. I could make out Lila's face, her expression dazed and unwell. I felt a fresh wave of nausea, but I kept my expression neutral. "Delete it," I ordered. He pressed the button. The thumbnail vanished. "Now the recently deleted folder," I said. I knew how phones worked. A muscle in his jaw twitched. He navigated to the folder and permanently deleted the file. "It's gone," he said, his voice hollow. "If I ever hear from you again," I said, leaning in one last time, my voice dropping to a whisper that was more threatening than any shout, "if you so much as look in my daughter's direction, I will not call the police. I will call your mother. And I will make sure every parent in this school district knows exactly what you are. Now get out of my house." He didn't need to be told twice. He shoved his phone into his pocket and practically ran for the front door, pushing past the last few stragglers without a backward glance. He disappeared into the night, swallowed by the darkness. I stood there, in the silent, dark living room, surrounded by the wreckage of the party. The adrenaline began to recede, leaving me feeling hollow and trembling. The air was thick with the ghosts of the evening, the spilled drinks, the cigarette smoke, the fear. A moment later, the front door closed, and Mark flicked on the main lights. The sudden brightness was jarring. The room was a disaster zone. But it was empty of everyone but us. Mark looked at me, his face a mixture of confusion, concern, and awe. "Maria? What in the world just happened? Where's Lila?" "She's safe," I said, my voice barely a whisper now. The strength I had summoned was gone. I walked over to the sofa, pushed a pile of coats onto the floor, and sat down, my legs unable to hold me any longer. I put my head in my hands and finally, allowed myself to cry. Continua a história. The tears were not loud or dramatic. They were a quiet, steady release, a draining of all the fear, the hurt, and the fury that had been boiling inside me for the last few hours, for the last few months. I cried for my daughter's terror, for the violation she had endured, for the innocence that had been stolen from her not by a video, but by the cruelty of someone she trusted. I cried for the sharp words we had exchanged, for the distance that had grown between us, a chasm that had nearly swallowed her whole. I felt the sofa dip as Mark sat beside me. He didn't speak. He simply put his arm around my shoulders and pulled me close. His solid, familiar presence was an anchor in the storm. I could smell the cold night air on his jacket, a clean, simple scent amidst the complex stench of the party. After a few minutes, my tears subsided. I took a deep, ragged breath and wiped my face with my hands. I have to go to her, I said, my voice thick. Mark nodded. I'll start dealing with this, he said, gesturing at the apocalyptic state of the living room. I stood up, my body feeling 100 years old. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step a conscious effort. The second floor was silent, the echoes of the party replaced by a heavy, waiting quiet. I walked to the bathroom and gently knocked on the door. Lila? I called softly. It's me. It's over. He's gone. I heard the lock turn with a faint click. The door opened a crack, and one of her eyes, red-rimmed and puffy, peered out. Seeing that it was just me, she opened it fully. She stood there, looking small and young in her party dress, her makeup a ruined mess. We looked at each other for a long moment, the air between us charged with all the unspoken words, all the pain and fear of the evening. I'm sorry, Mom, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry. Those 4 words shattered the last of my defenses. I opened my arms, and she fell into them, her body convulsing with deep, wrenching sobs. I held her tightly, my chin resting on the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo beneath the cloying perfume. I held her like I did when she was little and had a bad dream, when my embrace alone could ward off the monsters. It's okay, baby, I murmured into her hair, my own tears starting again. It's okay. I'm here. I've got you. We stood like that for a long time, in the bright, sterile light of the bathroom, surrounded by the mess of her attempted adulthood. It was the first time in months she had let me hold her without stiffening or pulling away. Finally, her sobs quieted to hiccups. She pulled back, wiping her nose on the sleeve of her dress, a childish gesture that made my heart ache. What did you do? She asked, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. What did you say to him? I made him go away, I said simply. For good. The video is gone. He won't bother you again. The relief that washed over her face was so profound it was almost painful to witness. The weight of 1,000 anxieties seemed to lift from her shoulders. How? She breathed. It doesn't matter how, I said, smoothing her hair back from her damp forehead. What matters is that it's over. I led her out of the bathroom and into her bedroom. I sat her down on the edge of her bed, with its rumpled comforter and piles of clothes. I knelt in front of her, taking both of her hands in mine. They were cold. Lila, I said, my voice firm but gentle. Look at me. You made a mistake. A big one. But you are not defined by your mistakes. You are defined by how you get back up. And you are not alone. Do you understand that? You never have to face anything like this alone. She nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I was so scared, she confessed, her voice a tiny whisper. I didn't know what to do. I thought if I just gave him the money, it would stop. I thought if I could just be cool enough, mature enough for him, he would love me. Hearing her say it out loud was a knife to the heart. It was the oldest, saddest story in the world. Oh, honey, I said, my own vision blurring. The right person will love you for exactly who you are. They won't make you pay for it. They won't make you afraid. We talked for over an hour, there on the edge of her bed. The house was quiet around us, the only sound the occasional clatter from downstairs as Mark began the Herculean task of cleaning. She told me everything. The initial flattery of Lucas's attention, the slow escalation of his demands, the paralyzing fear when he revealed the video. She told me about the shame, the feeling that she had brought it all upon herself. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't lecture. I just let her pour it all out, the poison that had been festering inside her for weeks. And as she talked, I saw the 17-year-old stranger recede, and my Lila, my smart, funny, strong-willed Lila, began to reappear through the cracks in her armor. Eventually, exhaustion overtook her. Her eyelids grew heavy, her words began to slur. I helped her out of the party dress and into an old, soft t-shirt and sweatpants. I pulled back the covers and she climbed into bed, looking like the little girl she still was, somewhere deep inside. I bent down and kissed her forehead. Get some sleep, I whispered. As I turned to leave, her voice stopped me. Mom? Yes, baby? Thank you, she said, her eyes already closing. For coming down for a glass of water. A small, weary smile touched my lips. Anytime, Lila. Anytime. I turned off her light and closed her door most of the way, leaving it open just a crack, the way she liked it when she was small. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the sound of her breathing even out into sleep. The house was finally, truly quiet. The silence was no longer empty or lonely. It was peaceful. I went back downstairs. Mark was in the living room, stuffing empty bottles into a large trash bag. He looked up as I entered, his face etched with a fatigue that went beyond physical tiredness. Is she okay? He asked. She will be, I said, and for the first time that night, I truly believed it. We all will be. I picked up another trash bag and joined him. We didn't speak much as we worked. We picked up sticky cups, wiped down surfaces, and opened windows to let the cold, clean night air wash away the stench of the party. We worked in a shared, understanding silence, a team again, rebuilding our home piece by piece. As I was gathering up my grandmother's stained tablecloth, feeling a pang of sadness for the physical evidence of the night's damage, my foot knocked against something under the sofa. I bent down and retrieved it. It was Lila's rose-gold clutch purse. It must have fallen during the chaos. I picked it up. It felt different now. It wasn't a symbol of her rebellion or her secret life anymore. It was just a purse. A thing. I unzipped it. Inside, next to a tube of lip gloss and a crumpled tissue, was a folded stack of bills. $500. The ransom she never had to pay. I held the money in my hand, feeling the crisp texture of the bills. It represented so much, her hard work, her fear, her desperation. But it also represented her survival. And mine. I looked around the room. It was still a mess, but it was our mess. The war was over. The battlefield was a disaster, but we were still standing. The monsters had been sent packing. And my daughter was safe upstairs, sleeping in her bed. The forgotten phone had been the key that unlocked the truth. But the love for my child, the ferocious, unyielding, messy, and complicated love of a mother, that was the force that had changed everything. The party was over, but our story, I knew with a deep, unshakable certainty, was just beginning again. Historia final.